Want to welcome everybody. We are live here, Iowa basketball postgame. And as we are beginning our broadcast, I'm looking at the screen here. Xavier and Virginia Tech, Jack Nungy and the Musketeers. And they've pulled it out at the buzzer. A last-second stop. Number 25, Xavier defeats unranked Virginia Tech 59-58. So happy for Jack Nungy there. They had a disappointing loss the other night to Iowa State. Iowa basketball, no disappointment today. A routine victory, and I think we're all ready for what's to come Monday. 85-51, the win. The Hawkeyes take down Portland State, and we will be joined in a moment by Coach Gary Close. Gary's actually at the game today, so he'll be calling in and talking to us about what he saw. And certainly we'll be taking your calls as well. We'll start right here. Thank you for calling Iowa at the Voice of College Football. Well, actually, this is not the Voice of College Football. Excuse me. This is from the Hawkeye of the Storm. That was bound to happen at some point. Who's on the line? Mario, how are you today? Absolutely is. Hold on a second, Mario. Let's get you. I want to make sure that everybody can hear you. All right. Try it again, Mario.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. How are you?
Okay, just a couple of side note on the football.
Sure.
If Minnesota beats Wisconsin, either we play Michigan or Ohio State. If we do go to the Big Ten championship game next week, how do you think we should approach that? I mean, it's going to be tough, Stuff.
Well, I will say, and I know we're here to talk basketball, and I have no problem answering your question. I figure we talk about football at some point tonight. I think Iowa obviously matches up better with Michigan. I mean, just from a skill standpoint, they do. I think Iowa's going to have problems scoring points either way. So I would like the less dynamic offense, and that is Michigan. But Michigan runs the ball very well. I would give Iowa a chance against Michigan. I mean, I don't know what I'd rank as far as percentage chance. I guess if you wanted me to throw a number out there, I'd say Iowa would have like a 25% chance against Michigan and maybe like a 10% chance against Ohio State. I don't think they're great odds either way.
Yeah, and I just wanted to get your quick thoughts, and then I have a real quick basketball question too.
Sure.
But what do you think of going forward? We got Virginia on Monday. I know. Then going forward, we got December is going to be Ohio State and all that and everything. What do you think about how they look going forward?
Here's what I don't like about the schedule, caller. I understand why Fran McCaffrey built the schedule the way he did and scheduling basically 6 to 7 cupcakes out of the gates. But here's the problem. You go from 0 to 60 like that. And I just don't think that's what this – I think it would have been nice to have a Utah State. They play Utah State in a few weeks up at the Pentagon in Sioux Falls. That would have been a good game to have like this weekend before the Big Ten ACC Challenge, because when you go down to Virginia, that might be the best defensive team in the country. They are year in and year out, and they're not a great offensive team, so I think Iowa should be able to hang with them, but this offense is going to be really tested really quickly against the Cavaliers. So that's the only thing I don't like about the schedule. I understand scheduling softer with this young team, but I would have liked a stepping stone before you get to the ACC Big Ten Challenge.
Yeah, because I know and guess we play after, Virginia, we got Purdue. And that's always hard,
Right.
That's always and stuff.
Well, and then you get Illinois. They get Virginia, Purdue, and Illinois. I mean, it is a gauntlet. Yeah. They could easily go 0-3 these next 3 games. I'm not saying they will, but if you're not careful, you go 0-3 and 0-2 to start the conference play. And, we've been down that road before, but certainly you don't want to.
Yeah, and real quick, I love your show. You're good.
Appreciate that.
And just real quick, I think with Keegan Murray, the Murray brothers, and if we can get, we don't have, with Garza and Wieskamp and everything. I'm hoping, with Bohannon and stuff, Toussaint, I mean, he'll be running the show,
right?
Point and stuff. So it's hard to know. I mean, I guess we'll know Monday.
And Toussaint, I give Joe a lot of credit right now. He's leading the team in assists at over 5 a game, which is a good number. He's not turning the ball over at a real high rate. The whole team isn't turning the ball over at a high rate, which is great. But again, to me, he's still not shown the ability to consistently hit that outside shot. So I'll be anxious to see how Virginia plays him. The matchup between Toussaint and Virginia point guard Kihei Clark, to me, is going to be an exceptional matchup because both guys are undersized, but certainly Kihei Clark, a more known commodity, especially defensively. But those two guys are going to be bulldogs in each other's faces on Monday.
Yeah, and then real quick, and I'll listen to a show with Coach Close. I think I think going forward, I mean, I'm hoping that this team, you never know what's going to happen. It could be they're not picking this, probably do well, but I hope that they can surprise us, this year and stuff. So
they've got. I'll tell you this, caller. They've got the athleticism. If they can stay consistent from three, they're going to have a shot because they've got the athleticism to play decent defense this year, despite a coaching staff that is just simply not what you'd like to see on the defensive end. But that's, again, we've seen Iowa teams under Fran play decent enough defense to where you can make up for some other deficiencies, specifically the Utah, Gasell, Woodbury eras. So this defense needs to be maybe top 50, I think. If you can be top 50, and that's not a real tall order, but it is also a tall order if you're comparing to what it's been over the past 4 or 5 years. If they can be top 50 in the country, to me, that gives them a chance to at least be in the upper tier of the Big Ten. I'm not saying top 3 or 4, but I'm saying top 7, and which would be what you need to do if you want to make the tournament.
Yeah, and real quick before I go, I think it's I'm excited, for both football and basketball and stuff, and in general being a Hawk fan and with women's going on, wrestling, so just a lot of things going on.
Absolutely, it's a busy time of year.
Yeah, so I appreciate taking my call, but I'll be enjoyed to listen to your show with Coach Close.
Appreciate it.
And like I said, I enjoy watching your show podcast and try to listen to it when I can.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the call. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So appreciate the early call there. And we are going to get Coach Close on here. Let me get this over to Coach. And again, if you're just now joining us, Iowa with the 85-51 win over Portland State on BTN Plus. I'm sure some of our viewers perhaps were not able to watch the game. BTN Plus has been okay. It's actually, as far as the service, now there was some bad camera work again tonight, but I haven't had too many streaming issues. The first game of the season, if I recall, like the first 4 minutes of the actual game were cut off because BTN Plus just didn't turn on the stream. And that's how ridiculous BTN Plus has been. So I give them credit. They've done better things here over the past few weeks getting that stream working. And again, Iowa took care of business today, 85-51, excuse me. Keegan Murray with 23 points, 9 boards, 10 of 16 from the field. And again, he's doing so with very, very I shouldn't say little help. Especially early in these last 2 games, he has been dominant early. And Iowa's offense has struggled the first 10 to 15 minutes of each game. And that's a concern. I mean, they scored 31 points in the first half. That's not like a Fran team, especially against the likes of Portland State, who, if you look at KenPom, and I know it's early, but if you look at KenPom's rankings, they're probably one of the 50 to 100 worst teams in the country overall. And then that includes defense. So certainly, that number doesn't pop out to you. Now, they did bounce back in the second half, and they score 54. So this is what this team's going to give you. They're going to be halves, and you could attribute this to the fact that they're playing another mid-major. You can call it a bye game. It's what I guess it is. I guess you can attribute it to the fact that it's a bye game, and it's bye game number 6 now. But I think there are going to be games this year because you don't have the likes of Joe Wieskamp, CJ Frederick, Luka Garza, who are just guaranteed buckets basically every night, especially Luka. There are going to be nights where you're probably going to have to win on defense. And that's why I still have hope for this team, because I still believe this team has the athleticism and they appear to have the desire to play defense. And I haven't seen that. Even last year, we all thought heading into last season with Luka and Joe back and all these kids, we thought this is going to be the year where Iowa takes defense seriously. And maybe they did. Maybe they took defense seriously. It didn't appear to me that they always did. There were games where they played decent enough defense. But ultimately, lack of athleticism, lack of lateral speed killed Iowa game in and game out. And we saw it against Oregon in the NCAA tournament. I don't see a team like this getting routed like that unless they just check out mentally. And I don't think the team last year ever checked out mentally. I don't think they checked out in that Oregon game. Oregon just destroyed Iowa in speed and athleticism. And that was disappointing because Iowa had a ridiculous amount of shooting talent, of scoring talent. And I go back to what I said to Coach Close, who, by the way, if you're just joining us, Coach Close just texted me. He is en route back to his hotel in Iowa City. So he'll be jumping on with us as soon as he gets back, should be in less than 10 minutes. And he'll talk Iowa hoops, and certainly we'll preview Iowa, Virginia on Monday. But it's amazing to me, and I might be exaggerating this a bit, but when I compare this team to what we saw last year, to me, it's almost a complete 180, not 360, complete 180. Last year, you're so dependent on A, Luka Garza, and B, the three-point shot. So dependent. And the problem is Luka. Now, the great thing about Luka is he didn't get hurt all year. I would have hated to see what would have happened had Luka gotten hurt at some point. But when the three-point shot's not falling, and there weren't many games where the three-point shot's not falling, because when you have the likes of Garza, Wieskamp, Frederick, Bohannon, somebody's usually going to hit, right? But when the three-point shot's not falling, they didn't have the athleticism or the speed to keep up with teams like Oregon. We saw them lose a home game to Indiana, I recall, maybe in January of last year, which was sort of an odd loss. But as I recall, Iowa couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And again, not enough defense to claw you out of a game like that. This team is totally different. Now, could they become reliant on Keegan Murray? It's possible. We've seen Keegan take over early in the last couple of games. I think last game he scored, the first 17 points for the Hawks. So it is possible that could happen, and you don't want to be reliant on one guy. But I shared this stat last time out. Or actually, I believe I shared it on my podcast this week 182 of Brada's Branded Thoughts, that if you look at the first 4 to 5 games, specifically the first 4 blowouts for Iowa this year, and maybe we're reading too much into this, but the first 4 blowouts for Iowa this year, Keegan Murray averaged just over 20 minutes per game, all right? Which obviously is not much, but again, they're blowing teams out, and that makes sense. Last year, you could argue Iowa was more stacked than this year, and it's not even close, and Garza still averaged over 24 minutes per game through those first 4 blowouts, which tells me a couple things. A, it tells me perhaps too reliant on Luka Garza, all right? And B, it tells me that this Iowa offense, which is averaging the most points in the country right now at around 97, it probably went down a bit today because they didn't reach the 97-point mark, but right around 97 points per game. It's more free-flowing. It's not a reliant as a 1-1 guy. Even a guy like Keegan Murray, who's been unbelievable, they can survive without him on the court. And that's great because, again, you never know what's going to happen. Injuries happen. And certainly, Keegan Murray is the most important player on this roster, but we've seen Chris Murray step up. We've seen Tony Perkins step up. Patrick McCaffrey comes back from injury tonight. He was really good. Mark Duff asks, that's actually the comment. Let's get to Mark's question. Could you talk about the half-court game? It doesn't seem to flow smoothly yet. First half, it didn't. And I don't really know what to attribute that to. I would guess, and I'll ask Gary this question, but again, I would guess that part of that is you're 5 games into the season, 6 games into the season. You haven't played anybody with a pulse. You're playing at home. At some point, you're probably going to be a bit lackadaisical. That's just human nature, right? And these are 18 to 20. Well, how old is Jordan? Like 24? 18 to 24-year-olds. So, the half-court game, they're going to be getting out in transition a lot more than last year. They've just got the horses for it, more than they did last year. Not that they didn't want to get in transition last year, but again, with guys like Tony Perkins, the Murray twins, Joe Toussaint, Aaron Eulis running the show, they're going to be getting up and down more. So, yeah, teams are going to try to slow them down, force them into half-court basketball, and you're right. Iowa has struggled at times without Keegan Murray scoring the majority of its points in the half court. But again, I just don't know how to judge that at this point because it's so early and we haven't seen Iowa play anybody with a pulse. So I understand the concern there, but again, they scored 54 points in the second half. And again, guys like Sanford and we haven't even talked about Bohannon. We know those guys can score in the half court. They can shoot the three. Chris Murray is shooting. Chris Murray. Let's talk about Chris Murray for a second. Then I'll get to Doug's comment and question. Let me find Chris Murray's numbers. This is ridiculous. Now, this line may not jump off the screen at you, but Keegan Murray is shooting the three at an exceptionally high level. Okay, he's not a high volume guy, but the guy just shoots threes. And this is one of the things that I said after last season that I was looking for. To me, this team was always going to be very reliant on the step forward that they took on the defensive end. But with all the three-point shooting they lost over this past offseason, and of course culminating with CJ Frederick, the fact that they could get Bohannon back, and I'm not the biggest Jordan Bohannon fan. I like Jordan, but he's not, I've gotten frustrated with Jordan over the years. He's got his negatives, right? He's got his faults on the basketball court. I think he's a good kid, but he's got his faults. But with all the three-point shooting they lost, getting Jordan back was huge. Peyton Sandfort being able to come in as a freshman and score right away like he has done was going to be huge. Now, he has nothing against competition. I get it. But those two keys were huge. And then a guy like Chris Murray or Patrick, you needed another guy. You needed a third guy that you could come in and be a consistent three-point threat. And so far, it looks like it's Chris. Now, Keegan has also shown the ability to shoot the three well. This team in general is a lot better from three than I thought they would be. Tonight, they go just 6 of 19, so it didn't shoot a whole lot of three. They were able to get to the basket a lot in that second half. Portland State, again, I'm not sure how Portland State stuck around in the first. They were shooting like 19% from the field, which I guess in a way you can look at that and say, look, Iowa played terrible on offense, but they were still up double figures because they actually played defense, again, against a pretty bad team. If you need any context to Portland State, their only wins are against Evergreen State and George Fox. They lost to Portland by 15, and they lost to Oregon State. Only lost to Oregon State, the Beavs, by 9. Now, Oregon State, in case you don't know anything about Oregon State, they are Pac-12, so being able to play them within 9 is somewhat impressive, but Oregon State's not a good team. They go on the road, they lose to Iowa State. They go on the road, they lose to Tulsa. They lost it at home. They lost at home to Samford, not Stanford, Samford by 1. And then they lost to Princeton by 1. So I guess take that for what you may. I mean, again, Portland State hasn't really beaten anybody, but they did play Oregon State fairly close. Oregon State, though, again, 1-4. And by the way, as we're waiting for Coach Close to join us here, I will let everybody know, don't turn us off, because we're going to be here for a little while talking Iowa basketball, and I promised anybody has an Iowa football question, we can talk Iowa football, especially given the win over Nebraska today, and we already took a call at the beginning of our show about football. But if you want to watch some quality hoops, turn over to ESPN2, because the Iowa State Cyclones, of course, Iowa plays in a couple of weeks. They are playing number 9 Memphis, about to tip off on ESPN2. If you didn't hear, Iowa State knocked off Xavier the other night. Jack Nungy and Xavier fall to Iowa State. Very surprising result, because to me, Iowa State has not looked that great so far in the non-conference, and I think that was one of the bigger surprises so far in college basketball this year was Iowa State's win against Xavier, who was, again, top 25 team. Iowa State's undefeated. Of course, Memphis, one of the most stacked teams in college basketball, I believe number 9 in the country. They've got talent everywhere. Penny Hardaway, the head coach at Memphis. So it'll be interesting to see. This is a fun time, folks. If you're an Iowa fan, we just watched Iowa football defeat Nebraska in a huge comeback. Iowa basketball takes care of business. We've got Iowa State and Memphis tonight, which intrigues me. I mean, I'm not an Iowa State hater. It always intrigues me when Iowa State's playing, but especially the number 9 team in the country and a team that Iowa plays, Iowa State. Again, just a couple weeks away. The Cyhawk series not long off right here in Ames. We're, of course, broadcasting from Ames. And then if you really want to stay up late tonight, Gonzaga, who just beat UCLA the other night, the number 2 team in the country. Gonzaga plays Duke tonight. Number 1 versus number 5. And that game begins at 9:30 Iowa time. So this is a fun time of year. I know everybody talks about how it's such a busy time, especially the media, and I get it. I'm not part of the Iowa media. I'm sure if I was a beat writer or certainly a columnist that I'd be worn out, and that's part of the reason why I never ever had any desire to pursue that type of profession, because I don't want this to be work. I want to be able to talk to our listeners. I want to talk about Iowa, but I want to do so on my terms and be able to enjoy myself doing it and speak my mind. And certainly I hope that I'm doing that. Again, Coach Close does the same thing. Of course, former Iowa assistant coach, former Wisconsin assistant coach for that matter. But, and again, he last I heard from him was about 10 minutes ago, and he said he was about 10 minutes out. So any moment now we'll be joined by Coach Gary Close. Doug Moore says, I think they need to play Keegan and Chris Moore together. They will, Doug. Believe me. Those guys will be on the court more as this season progresses. Again, Keegan's only averaging, 20-some minutes, and right now Chris is coming off the bench. Could that change at some point? If Keegan keeps playing the way he's playing, and to me, I've seen, especially his last couple games, his confidence level's growing. His upside is great enough to where I could easily see him end up starting this year. Now, I'm not saying that'll happen. Fran doesn't have the reputation of mixing up the starting lineup a whole lot. And I don't know who you bench. I mean, who do you put on the bench for Chris? I don't think that's going to happen. I wouldn't be shocked, but I don't think it's going to happen. The only way I could see that happening is if Joe Toussaint perhaps started playing really poorly, and maybe Aaron Eulis isn't playing great. Maybe Fran shifts Bohannon over to the point, which means then you could maybe insert Chris at the 2, which would be a really big lineup. Bohannon at the 1, Chris at the 2, Patrick at the 3. Perhaps you slide Patrick back to the 2, and then of course Keegan at the 4 and Rebraca at the 5. Maybe Iowa at some point goes big. I think Rebraca's playing good minutes right now. He's not a huge offensive producer, but I think he's playing good minutes right now. But there might be scenarios where Iowa does go. I mean, there could be times when Chris and Keegan are on the court at the same time. Maybe not starting games, but there will be times where they're on the court at the same time. You might have Chris playing the 5 or Keegan playing at the 5, and then of course the other twin playing at the 4, and so forth down the line. So that will happen, Doug. These guys are too athletic, too long. Chris is 6'8". And that's one of the reasons why I really, really like Peyton Sandfort. Like, everybody realizes how great of a shooter he is, and he's not afraid to shoot as a freshman. But just the fact that he's so long. You saw him post up today and score with the left hand. That was nice. That was nice to see. And if you want to compare him to a guy like Frederick, and he's really nothing like Frederick, but if you want to make that comparison, when was the last time you saw CJ Frederick post anybody up? All right. He just didn't have the size. Now, Wieskamp posted guys up at times. Of course, Wieskamp's playing in the NBA, so maybe that's an unfair comparison to Peyton Sandfort. But Peyton's going to be able, as his game continues to progress, he's going to be able to score on players. He's big enough, and again, he's going to get bigger, physically bigger, as time goes on. Mark says in the first half, Portland State seemed to be overplaying the passing lanes. Iowa did a better job in the second half. Yeah, and here's the deal. Let's just look at this from a broader standpoint, Mark. Any struggles Iowa has to score, I mean, I'd rather be having issues right now scoring the ball than defending. Because if there's one thing we have confidence as Iowa fans of, it's that Fran McCaffrey understands how to score points and put points on the board, right? When has an Iowa team ever been bad on offense under Fran? I don't think it's ever happened. And I don't think it probably will ever happen. So we can say, well, they lost a lot of shooting. Who's their center? Who's going to score inside? I would rather them excel early on defense. I've said that before about recruiting. I would rather Iowa be able to recruit defensive-minded guys. Now, they've tried. Brandon Hutton was recruited here. He ends up transferring. Christian Williams never really worked out. He was more of a defensive player. But again, I think they've got a good roster now of guys who are long, athletic, and who are defensive hounds. Joe Toussaint, to me, his strength is on the defensive end. Tony Perkins, same thing. You could argue that the Murray twins both are defensive-minded, although Keegan's his offensive game has just skyrocketed. But to me, they've got enough guys. where they can play defense in the Big Ten. I still have a question. My biggest question, and I don't want to, I guess I'll mention this before Gary jumps on because I know I've kind of beat this dead horse several times over the past couple of weeks. I'm still concerned about center. I'm still concerned about center because Josh Ogundele, I know he's been under the weather, but he comes into the game tonight with about 4 minutes to go. Riley Mulvey comes in with about 3 minutes to go. This was Fran's last chance to get those guys minutes before the real competition starts. So I'm not sure why those guys didn't see the floor earlier. I understand the game was somewhat still hanging in the balance at halftime, so you're not going to play him in the first half. But, man, once you get up by 20 or 25, I think you'd want to get Josh Ogundele or Riley Mulvey in the game if you have any idea of playing those guys next week. And, again, do you realize who they're starting the Big Ten with? They're starting the Big Ten with the two teams that have the best big men in the Big Ten. You play Purdue, who, again, Zach Edey, Trevion Williams, probably most definitely the best big man duo in the Big Ten. And then you play Illinois, Kofi Cockburn, who we know the only guy that could guard him last year in the Big Ten tournament was Josh Ogundele for like 30 seconds when Josh came in the game. So I worry about that. I know you can play zone. I don't love Iowa's zone. I never have, although, again, different group of players this year. But you're going to have somebody who can match up with those guys one-on-one, even if it's only for a 5 to 6 minute stretch in a game. You're not going to be playing zone the whole time. And who's going to guard him? If it's not Mulvey or Ogundele, is it going to be Rebraca? Is Rebraca going to be able to match up with Kofi Cockburn? That's a question I have. And again, you play these next two games. Well, two of the next three games. Of course, the first two Big Ten games are really the two best teams in the Big Ten as far as centers. And you've got three of the best big men collectively between those two teams. So it shall be interesting to see. But again, so far so good as far as what we're seeing from Filip Rebraca. He just doesn't have the size that I think Iowa will need at times. So you hope that Ogundele is full speed come Monday. I don't know if he was full speed tonight, but again, didn't get much time. Want to bring in Coach Gary Close to our show this evening. Coach, we appreciate you joining us. And
you bet, Cory.
I know you're down in Iowa City right now, so I'll have to ask you, first of all, what was it like to be back in Carver? I know you were there a few weeks ago as well, but what was the game like in person?
It was fun. I enjoyed it. Got to see some old players that I had coached and a few other fans that I recognized, and it's always good to see a college basketball game, so it was a lot of fun.
All right, first half, a little bit slow start offensively. What did you see? 31 points is rare against any team for a Fran coach squad, especially a team like Portland State, who we didn't really think was a great defensive team, although they did challenge Oregon State a few weeks ago. What was Portland State doing in that first half to give Iowa problems offensively?
I think Iowa just probably had a little bit too much turkey the night before. They call it food coma or something. Just looked a little sluggish to get it going, and second half was kind of a totally different story. So I think they're ready to take on some new competition, and it's tough. You play, what have they played, 5-6 games now, and I think they're ready to step up and take on a challenge, and obviously that's going to happen starting Monday. So I think, considering what they've been through, I think they've done a real nice job and put themselves in position to see where they're at, and they're going to learn a lot about this team, of course, in the next week or so.
The one criticism I would have to this schedule, Gary, and we've talked about the schedule and why Fran scheduled the way he did. I'm disappointed that all these other teams are playing in these Thanksgiving week tournaments, and Iowa's sitting here playing Portland State and Western Michigan. That disappoints me as a fan. But I understand why Fran did it. I guess my question is it concerning to you that there's no stepping stone to what we have coming next week, the likes of playing at Virginia, at Purdue, home against Illinois? You kind of go from 0 to 60 in a split second.
Well, a lot of those Christmas and Thanksgiving tournaments, those things are booked way in advance. And so in some cases it's hard to get into, and so that could have been a situation there. I think beyond that, I think he felt that he had a young team. He was replacing a lot of players. He wanted to get some guys some significant minutes, get some confidence. And I think that's the route they followed. And we'll find out here pretty quick. I think anytime you play Virginia, regardless of when you play them, you're going to be concerned. But there's no question that, the competition is going to go up. But some of those guys have played in it. So it's not like none of them have played in games like that. Obviously Jordan has, and Connor and even Keegan. So they can bring the other guys along. So I think all in all, they're in pretty good shape, and they'll find out here what things they need to work on, because they'll get exposed, as all teams do when you get into this type of part of the season, starting on Monday.
And Patrick McCaffrey comes back tonight. I thought he was really good in the second half. Obviously, was aggressive, taking it to the strike, and 14 points, 5 of 10 from the field. Really, again, in attack mode all night. What did you see from him? Of course, coming off an ankle injury, it was good to see him kind of bounce back.
Yeah, I think he looked a little rusty in the first half, which is understandable, having sat out the games that he sat out. And then, in the second half, he seemed to get his legs underneath him and had a terrific second half. So that's a good sign going into these next few games.
And Keegan Murray, again, we talk about efficiency every night with him. 23 points, 9 boards, 10 of 16 from the field. Again, was in the game maybe a little longer than I would have liked, just because the game was closer than I think many people expected. Tony Perkins, again, hits double figures. He seems to be getting consistent enough to where you're going to hopefully be able to rely on him for 8 to 10 points a game. And we talked about Iowa's offensive struggles in the first half, 31, but then they bounced back with 54 in the second.
Yeah.
So the hangover didn't last long.
Food coma was over at halftime.
The food coma was over at halftime. And I did want to pull up here one thing that we talked about last time we were on together, Gary, was the Big Ten and some of the shortcomings of the Big Ten so far in the conference. I will say this. I was the Big Ten's biggest critic for a few days. These last few days have changed my mind. They have taken a big step forward as far as wins. You've got Michigan State reeling off a couple wins, although they did lose to Baylor today. But Baylor, of course, is the reigning national champs. But Michigan State with a couple nice wins.
That was like a Sweet 16 tournament down there. That field was just loaded. They had four. I think they had 4 ranked teams in that tournament, and that didn't include Michigan State, who wasn't ranked. So that was probably the toughest tournament that was there, and they had 2 really good wins, and obviously Baylor is really good as well. So that's they're a young developing team, but obviously are very dangerous. And Wisconsin got a great tournament win in Vegas, beat a very good Houston team. That field was a little bit down, not a typical Maui field where you have like 3 or 4 ranked teams, but Houston's good, and they look good in beating them and then beating St. Mary's. So, and there were some other wins along the way. So when we get into this ACC Big Ten Challenge this coming week, that'll give us some more answers, because there'll be some real good matchups.
And Wisconsin also beat Texas A&M. Don't know much about A&M, but that's 3 straight quality Power 5 wins in a row for Wisconsin. And we talked about Davis, between Davis and Davison, and I'm trying to think who's the third kid that really stepped up during the tournament.
Well, the kid Tyler Wall.
Yeah,
who plays the 4 for him, and he's definitely improved. He's a real good player, tremendous defender. Their defense is in mid-season form already, which Houston found out. I mean, Houston scored 20 points in the first half. Now they probably felt they didn't play as well as they were capable of, and certainly didn't shoot the ball as well as they were. But Wisconsin had something to do that with their defense. So that was a nice tournament win, and so it's the league is always going to be competitive. We'll see this week with the ACC Challenge where we stand, but some nice showings last week.
And just so everybody knows, Penn State had an opportunity, Gary, against I think a pretty good LSU team. I know they were undefeated heading into this game. Penn State ends up falling in overtime today, but a good showing for the Nittany Lions, 63-68 there. Michigan State, I mentioned, they beat UConn. Good win yesterday for Maryland against Richmond. I know Richmond was actually favored in that game. Maryland fought and clawed through that game. And really the only game that I could say, besides the Baylor game today that went against the Big Ten this week, was that buzzer beating 3 from Florida to beat Ohio State, which was disappointing.
Right.
Looked like Ohio State had that game locked up. And then, of course, the heroics from the Gators. And let's see, Northwestern beating Georgia, Illinois over Kansas State on Tuesday. Ohio State beating Seton Hall. I'll tell you a team who's struggling right now, Gary, and I don't know what to make of this. I know we've kind of reasoned why Kofi Coburn was out early, but this is a live score right now, Gary. Texas Rio Grande is leading Illinois 64-61 midway through the second half.
Wow.
Now, I've looked at Rio Grande's schedule. I believe they were let me look at their record. I believe they were like 1-2. They're 4-2, excuse me, but they haven't beaten anybody. Their 2 wins, or their 2 of their 4 wins, Texas A&M International, Paul Quinn, Northern Arizona in overtime. They haven't beaten anybody. To me, there's concern with Illinois right now because they have played teams like Cincinnati, but they've gotten blown out. They got beat by 1 to Marquette. They get blown out by Cincinnati. They did beat Kansas State. Are you concerned about the Illini at this point?
Well, probably maybe a little bit. I'm sure the coaches, they're turning the ball over just way, way too much. And when you do that, you're putting yourself in jeopardy of getting beat or at least being challenged. And they've lost some good players. I think even with the good players coming back, when you lose, like, the guard they lost, he's having a terrific pro career with the Bulls. I mean, that's how good he was. So those are holes that are hard to fill. And so it may take them a little time. Maybe it's good Iowa's getting them early in the Big Ten schedule before they hit their stride, but they're still a handful. They might be a little bit too waiting to play some better teams and having a hard time concentrating maybe a little bit.
And here's what I'll say too, and I brought it up before you jumped on with us, Gary. My only concern, and you're probably tired of me saying this weekend or game in and game out, but my only concern coming out of tonight for Iowa, I'm not too concerned about the slow start offensively. Defensively, I think again, once we see steeper competition, we'll get an idea of where they're at defensively. But my only concern was you get Josh Ogundele back from illness tonight, but he doesn't come in until the 4-minute mark in the second half. Mulvey doesn't come in until the 3-minute mark in the second half. And next week, you're going to be going up against, I think, your first 2 Big Ten teams that you play are probably the 2 best big men teams in the Big Ten with Zach Edey, Trevion Williams, Kofi Coburn. So I still go back to that. I think there's going to be times where they need Josh or Riley to play big minutes, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes in a game. And I'm just concerned that perhaps those guys aren't ready. Do you care to offer any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's just a guess, but I don't think they're ready. I think they're a ways off. I think what you'll see the Murray kid, Chris, play more.
Okay.
Or you'll see zone. I think you could see some zone to keep people out of foul trouble and take away the trying to match up people man to man. That would be my guess, and it's pure guess. But as little as they played and as good as Chris Murray is playing, my guess is that they'll play him, and I would say those other 2 are down the line a little bit, and I would be surprised if they play significant minutes. We
do have a caller here for you, Gary. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Doug from Ames, Iowa.
Hey, Doug. How are you?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
I had a couple questions about big men. One, back in the 90s when I started following Iowa basketball, you guys were always dominant on rebound margin. And what did you and Dr. Tom do to become dominant in rebounding? And then second, Riley Mulvey kind of reminds me of like a young Les Jepson. And you guys have played him for 2 years, Les Jepson. how do you see the development of Riley Mulvey, and how do you keep a player positive that doesn't play? And I know that Cory's been talking about the development of our big men, and I just was kind of curious because you guys developed a couple big men.
Yeah. Those are two really good questions. I think from a rebounding standpoint, like a lot of things, it's kind of what you emphasize. That's what you get really good at. And rebounding was really important. I know when Coach Davis went over statistics, that's maybe the first statistic he hit on was, who's our leading rebounder, and where can you improve? And so whether it's drill work or stat emphasis or obviously good shot selection, solid defense are going to help your rebounding as well. But being aggressive, going on the glass, rebounding is defensively, the defense isn't over until the rebound is secured. There's nothing more troubling than to play pretty good possession of defense and then not get the rebound. So, and then as far as the second question goes, big guys just develop at all different kinds of rates. I mean, you talked about Les. He hardly played at all his first 2 years, and by the time he was a senior, he was an NBA draft pick. And you just got to be patient. You got to continue to work with him individually and give him as many possessions as you can get, whether it's on the scout team or with a top group, and just stay patient and hope they're hard workers and they'll continue to improve. So, and a lot of times they can take a big jump, like Les did. Frank Kaminsky at Wisconsin hardly played his first couple of years, and by the time he was a senior, he's one of the best players in the country. So, got to be patient. You got to continue to work with him. He's got good size. He's got good hands. He's just got to develop.
Absolutely, and those are excellent examples to compare. You mentioned size, and Riley is a kid who, at least at the high school level, was a defensive-minded kid, so he's still developing his offensive game. I would hope that at some point, Gary, maybe this isn't reasonable, and I know you offered your take that it doesn't look like those guys are ready for this stage yet. I hope that at some point this season, one of those guys can emerge to where you can at least get them spot minutes. Is that too much to ask for?
Yeah, it's a long year, and you watch people in practice, and they show some signs, and then you kind of go with it. But and then on the other hand, sometimes the benches get even shorter when you get into the Big Ten because the competition is so difficult. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think my guess is right now, I think you'll see more minutes for Chris Murray as an alternative to those other two guys. That would be my guess, and I could be dead wrong.
Well, you're right. As far as how Chris is playing right now, 13 points tonight, 6 boards, 2 of 2 from 3. He's shooting the 3 ball really well, Gary, and he's not a shot-happy kid, but he makes them when he shoots them. And we had somebody earlier call in and ask, do we see Chris Murray and Keegan playing at the same time? And I think that the answer to that question is yes, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I think you will.
Their upside is too great not to have them on the court at the same time. And
then if you play them with Patrick, you're playing 3 guys that are 6'9" and long and pretty athletic. So
right,
maybe not as physical. So that's the problem with the big bodies. But that's where you might see some zone as well. They could have some real length in their zone if they're playing those 3 guys. So that would kind of be my guess. But we're going to have to wait and see next week.
Absolutely. Monday will be the day, Iowa, Virginia. And to give you an update on Virginia, they beat Lehigh tonight, 61-43. Of course, Virginia, a really nice win the other night against Providence.
Real good.
That was impressive. And as you well know, Coach, just from your connections to Virginia, I know kind of through Wisconsin and the coaching connections there, they hold everybody down offensively. So Iowa's going to be going from scoring, of course, they only scored 85 tonight, but they're averaging around 97 to, I think, maybe 65 is the winning number. I know that's hard to estimate, but
yeah, I think that'll be high. That could be high. That's maybe, but it's I think that's going to be one of the keys. Can they win low possession, low scoring games? Good teams can. They got to find a way, and there's no way it's going to be in the 90s and 80s, and I'm guessing it won't even be in the 70s, and it might even be in the 50s. I mean, it's going to be a low possession game, which is going to, turnovers are going to be important. Not fouling is going to be important. Getting good possessions because you're not going to get a lot of them, and then they're going to have to play well on the defense end as well. So it's an abrupt change from what they've gone through in terms of number of possessions as well as the resistance they're going to face defensively. It's just going to be totally different than what they've faced so far.
And we've talked about Virginia's struggles early. They played a really good Houston team and lost. They lost to Navy. But since then, these last 3 games, they beat Georgia by double figures on a neutral court. They beat Providence by 18. They hold Providence to 40. That's a really good Providence team, I think. And then Lehigh, they win tonight by 18, hold them to 43.
Yeah.
So that's those are impressive numbers, regardless of who you're playing, especially when you're talking about the likes of Providence. And I will give everybody an update here before we sign off. Iowa State. So, Gary, I don't know if you would care to offer anything on Iowa State, but they beat Xavier the other night. And, of course, I was invested in that game because Jack Nungy transferred to Xavier, and he's playing great for the Musketeers.
Yeah.
But Xavier upset by Iowa State. And right now, Iowa State early on playing number 9 Memphis, and Iowa State up 10-4 about 8 minutes in. I didn't think Iowa State looked very good early this year, but, man, they've seemed to have found a stride.
Well, I haven't seen them play a minute, so I'd be hard to tell. But, you know, when you get these teams that get these players from the transfer portals,
yeah,
that you just don't know, they could be totally different than what they were the year before with a whole new team. It's kind of like the NBA. They make a few trades and sign a few free agents, and boom, it's a totally different team. So that must be the case with Iowa State. And so you got that on the tail end of these 2 games in the Big Ten as well as Virginia. You got 4 games that are going to be real challenging over the course of the next couple of weeks. So when those 4 games are done, you're going to have a real much better idea of what this Iowa team is like and where they need to improve.
And my wife and I will be at that Iowa State game. And when we got the tickets, I thought, oh, it's going to be it's never a routine win, although last year was pretty lopsided. But, man, this is not what I expected to see from Iowa State. And you're right, the transfer portal's been huge for them. Isaiah Brockington, a kid that I was familiar with from Penn State, he's playing great ball for them. And then Gabe Kalsher, another kid from Minnesota, high-volume three-point shooter. And
Big Ten players that played, you know, they're experienced Big Ten players. So that's a huge addition to your lineup.
Absolutely. And we'll see what happens there again. 10-7, 9 minutes in. Illinois now leading Texas Rio Grande 70-68 with 7:54 to go. So we'll see if the Illini hang on. But again, we'll be back. Iowa, Virginia, Monday, 6 p.m. in Charlottesville. It goes from 0 to 60 very quickly. My position to watch for, Gary, and if you care to offer any comments on this, Kie Clark, Joe Toussaint. That's a matchup of 2 little bulldogs.
Yeah.
And 2 very defensive-minded players.
Yeah, that's a real good point. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'll be curious to see how patient and how well they'll be able to handle a low-scoring, low-possession, grinding, physical game. It'll be because it hasn't been that way. They basically got whatever they've wanted when they've wanted it. So it's going to be I think that's what they got to get across the team, how much different it's going to be. And if we're good, we got to win games like that. So I'm curious to see, and it's going to put a stronger emphasis on their defense because they're just not going to get as many possessions. So they got to be able to do their job on the defense end. Well, it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Absolutely is, and it's been a fun day for Iowa sports. Iowa defeating Nebraska in football in a comeback victory, and then, of course, tonight's win over Portland State. And then Monday, again, we'll be here, Iowa basketball postgame from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so, and check us out also on Spotify, Anchor, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can hear this show, all of our past shows, as well as our shows with Coach Don Patterson over at the Iowa, the Voice of College Football channel. Those are all podcasted on our platform. So, Gary, appreciate the time as always. I want to wrap this up so you can enjoy time with your family this weekend. Safe travels back to Wisconsin, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, I'll look forward to it, Cory. Thanks.
All right, for Coach Close, I'm Cory Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a great night.